Chapter 4. Sins for Sinclair.
Sharp pickers lunge aggressively from the brush as the morning's refugees all scurry along the trail's edge. Caroline and her sisters are all bleeding from their legs through their evening wear as Dell urges them on. Brown Wool stands up better against the thorns as Thomas watches the rest from the rear with Teresa on his back. He clutches his pack preciously to keep it from snagging on the branches as they progress along their presumed escape. In a clearing on an outlook of the bluff, Thomas takes Caroline's purple hat from his satchel and slips it suspiciously and discreetly beside the trail. Reaching the rocky point told to Thomas, Caroline hurries ahead, oblivious to his plan. It is as if 20 hats have been lifted from her head as she twirls in blissful ignorance. Thomas drops Teresa from his back as Dell collapses on a nearby boulder beneath cedar boughs. As the youngest child is comforted by her nanny, the young man surveys the woods deliberately. Remains of Caroline's dress settle on her muddy ankles as she worries about her naked feet. She doesn't mind long and looks for Thomas to celebrate with her. But is lost in his guard, and she feels abandoned in her joy. What is it? Caroline probes. She looks along both shorelines and can see no sign of pursuit or distress. What is it, Thomas? From a boulder, a long black-haired Potawatomi woman leads two men up from the cliff to dart at the sisters with fearful determination. Three others grab her family from behind before anyone else can see who they are. Caroline must choose to fend off the rope, grappling her hands from her left or the burlap sack approaching from the right. Before she can make a choice, both slip around her as she is bound and dragged to her family's position by the boulder. Caroline's gagged screams sing a chorus with her sisters, but she is first to realize there is no one to answer. She mutters, "Thomas," as best she can through the burlap. She can hear a conversation as her sisters fall to sobs, but it is all too muted to understand. Fragile fingers find Caroline's wrists bound behind her back, and she bats them away, frightened. Again, they reach for her. Fingers, a score in a count, grab meekly at her hand, and she grabs Teresa, finally recognizing her touch. Caroline starts to search for more hands to hold with her other hand, bloody, ruined knuckles flailing frantically just inches from her others in futility. She finds something stiff under some cloth in the base of a tree beside the rock, but no more of her family's lady fingers to hold. Melody. Caroline attempts to locate her sister. Then again, less articulated but louder in her desperation, Melody. Caroline gags on spit gathering in her throat and surrenders. When someone grabs her robe, Caroline fights hard. Her foot catches the groin of her attacker but only removes him for two more sets of hands to grab her. She loses her sister's grip as her robe is removed. Focusing on taking her gown down over her feet, the attacker offers her an opportunity. While her hands are free, she swings with her strong arm, and she takes out an eye before being forced onto her belly against the ground. White-hot heat washes from the center of her skull, and white spots fill Caroline's entire perspective. Nothing but white spots. Nothing but white spots, and someone is coughing. White spots fade slowly, revealing daylight through woven hemp, and Caroline is the one coughing. At least her sister's fingers are back within her grasp. Like calling from a dream, Thomas scolds her attacker.
That wasn't what we agreed.
As the ringing subsides, Caroline can hear the voice clearly now but questions what she's heard. Teresa's cries grow louder, having listened to the struggle with Caroline.
"Shut it,"
yells a strange voice, abruptly ending the argument with Thomas. Caroline hears a thud as Thomas slumps down beside her knee. There is a Frenchman furiously bickering back, and Caroline senses a figure standing between her and the men's dastardly debate by the dampening wall of leather. "Shush," Caroline offers in a hushed voice to calm her sister, realizing the danger rising with the blood of frustrated men. Desperately, Caroline hoped the rustic woman with the kidnappers now had her and her sister's guard. Slowly and staggered, the girls try to catch their breath. Caroline can feel Thomas breathing but winces to force the worst thoughts imaginable from her mind. No sooner are Teresa's fits of gasps abated when Melody's unmistakable scream falls unbridled and away from her tethered sisters, trailing off over the side of the bluff beyond. "Melody!" Caroline screams after and pronounces the plea at the expense of her lip against the gag. A slap from one of the abductors splits her lip wide open, and she tastes blood in her mouth. Without a reply from her sister, she disregards the discipline and struggles against her restraints. Ignoring the burn on her bare stomach as she's thrown down, she repeats, saying, "No," in defiant grunts. Caroline cries over and over, gaining intensity while fighting masked men the whole way down a precarious trail. After being dropped twice, she exhausts herself and passes out. The last thing she remembers while being dragged from the mountain is water. Caroline turns her head toward the sound of water splashing. Sloshing steps suddenly erupt into rushing cannonballs on approach when a horse whines with disgust. Caroline gets carried to a boat by strangers, and whispers, "Smoke," before two furry men flop her into their raft.
Beside the fresh recruit, Sinclair could only sigh as the illegal black limousine cruised by for the third time. In place of his son sat a young deputy in the passenger seat of Sinclair's new but much slower vehicle parked on the hill coming down from the strict fort. She was a Model T with a do-it-yourself welded wagon, and was the only licensed vehicle in Mackinac Island's history. Reluctant looks of the officers to one another confirmed who commissioned their cruiser, who drove the other vehicle, and their complicity in the corrupt affairs plaguing their mockery of a town. As they allow the unlicensed limo to pass again without interference and at racing speeds, both men feel unsteady about both their enthusiasm to serve and their ability to protect the people sleeping behind them. From under the street lights, Tommy feels challenged by the dark and pushes the engine of the fine-tuned machine for another relieving lap, constricting the island. Boulders, blistered by winter, spray shards of icy glass broken from the lake that threaten the two tracks along the beach as the headlamps haphazardly light their way around the island's frigid shore. Jimmy can see the rambunctious beams terrorizing the night from the shrouded windows of the Silver Birches brothel. From a couch, Carlotta speaks softly.
"You going to go flag him down?"
"No."
Replies the house's Madame Claire. Unclear about whether to command or predict, she sits dealing with herself solitaire. Jimmy turns in protest.
"Well, this one is not crazy. Probably mow you down in the process,"
she remarks, completing a row. Claire was an enigma, protector to them all yet capable of orchestrating the cruel schedules of the house. Drawn to the corner of the parlor, it was as if all her authority was gifted to her by a portrait of her great-grandmother. She sat before the powerful painting and had a different colored valet for every day of the week. In the grand estate, 7 servants worked diligently and routinely every week. Each of them shared a unique silver mutation that set them apart. The guards assigned Monday and Wednesday were identical twins, slender and graceful. Interestingly, they both had gray stripes on their left eyebrows, adding to their striking appearance. Tuesday and Saturday's guards were sisters, both older than the rest. Saturday, the eldest sister, always hid her silver streak beneath her bonnet, while her younger sister didn't mind tucking her long white strand behind her left ear. On the other hand, Friday's guard stood out as the youngest of the ladies. She had a long white strand of hair that she often let fall from behind her ear and before her right eye, adding intrigue to her youthful appearance. Sunday's guard was the only male among the 7 servants, and he had a distinguished white spike below his lip that set him apart from his sisters. He was also the only one who accompanied Claire when she left the estate. Jimmy, who had been observing the crew for a while now, noted how diligently the knights of the portrait exchanged the candles in the parlor every evening, ensuring that neither madam would suffer from the dark.
"He'll burn it off in another lap or two.
Carlotta suggests as the car speeds off again.
Or maybe he'll run out of petrol."
Jimmy joins her on the couch and lifts her legs to sit under them. She playfully brushes his hat away with her foot.
"He shouldn't be in such a knot. He has to know she's got to work."
Claire states matter-of-factly and snaps to her girl, "Wednesday," for a cigarette. Carlotta rubs Jimmy's chest with her foot.
"Tommy's just jealous, I reckon. Or else he'd just fume in here with us, I think."
Jimmy touches her foot and looks into her eyes, grateful not to see her sent to the jobs that paid their way.
Let him run it out.
Claire had a particular regard for Carlotta, which was different from how she treated the rest of the girls. Jimmy failed to understand why Claire treated Carlotta differently and spared her from harsh treatment. But Jimmy did know he was falling in love with a privileged girl, following her whenever she beckoned. Wednesday sneers at the man touching her ward, to which Claire blows smoke at the girl and motions for her to go away.
Trust me, if they were asking for you, he'd be sharing too.
With the cigarette standing sternly between her fingers, she points to implicate Jimmy. Taking his gaze to Claire, she deals out the cards several times to her lonely game, pretending not to notice the obstinate boy staring her down.
Would that bring him in?
Claire bluffs, but Jimmy's not sold. Claire would not give up her prize girl, and Jimmy winked at the brass woman from across the room. A haze lifts between them as Carlotta smokes opium and releases a long puff between Jimmy and Claire's stare. A fine wood mouthpiece finds his lips as Carlotta tears him away from the contest, distracting him from her. Small tokes become long draws while his attention shifts to the raven-haired girl. From an opium high, Jimmy continues to stake out the card game across the room periodically. Carlotta rubs his shoulders and feeds him more draws of the pipe from a low candle. Each time the pipe returns, so do paranoid lapses of time with the madam staring and dealing until Jimmy lays bare-chested. The hour ends with Jimmy staring down the portrait, wondering who won the fight or which round they were in. Jimmy blinks, and Carlotta's likeness replaces the framed elder opposing him, much to his aghast. He has to blink several times for the cold likeness of the grand madam to return to her proper fearsome glory. He fans the back of his knuckles against Carlotta's glowing cheek beside him to check that she is honest, to which she hardly reacts from her stupor. As Jimmy tries to remember when Claire has retired, he struggles to count up to 3 to figure it out. He hears the chimes of the ivory clock and stands up to take a closer look at it, which is perched on the well-lit mantel beneath the painting. He tries to adjust the light to read the clock better. Tommy slams the door shut, which wakes Carlotta up. He storms up to Serena's room and throws parachutes of lace at the two of them, who were previously hypnotized but have now become somewhat lucid, and start snickering. Jimmy rejoins Carlotta on the couch, and they fall into a stone tangle of silk and skin bathed in candlelight. Serena's swift return from a shrewd limousine ride home with Tommy, along with another slam of the door, sends a smothering gust through the parlor, casting darkness over the engrossed lovers. With Carlotta too stoned to comprehend, Serena too mad to notice, and the knights dismissed from their post, Jimmy allows the portrait of the madam to fall dark for the first time tonight.
Carly is settling into her new room, carefully unpacking her most precious belongings meticulously. Overlooking the harbor, she thought the typewriter ought to sit on the desk for inspiration, and the duffel for her telescope's tripod lay unburdened beside it on cherry shingles. At a desk of darker wood, she hoped to sit looking out over her college in the morning and develop the excitement she felt. Glad to have a place to call her own, Carly is consumed by assembling her telescope. So much so that she has barely looked at her day bag since returning from her ride. With the telescope almost fully assembled, Carly collapses it and places it beside the wardrobe. She then picks up her bag and walks over to the bed, carefully sitting in the center of the 4 posts. Carly begins to rummage through her bag and pulls out several books, scattering them over the duvet. However, her attention is immediately drawn to a violet-bound hardback, which she pulls out and leans against the headboard. A brass lamp illuminates the room with a satisfying click, casting Carly's gold outline behind the book over her midnight mast. As she runs her fingers over the book's title, Great Lakes Murder and Mystery, Carly's curiosity is piqued. She opened the book to the middle and started thumbing through it, her eyes lighting up upon spotting a photo that instantly reminded her of the watermark illustration of Lover's Leap on her map. She traces back to the beginning of the chapter, marked by the reclaimed brochure, and begins reading, The Siren of Mackinac. Carly becomes increasingly engrossed in the story with each passing page, completely losing track of time.